So this video is the second video in a deep dive that I'm doing on Janie's dog, or Janie's not dog. I started out with a video yesterday where I was discussing Janie's need to apparently protect her dog. So she had the RCMP wanting to search her trailer and she said, "There's a dog in there." And apparently they didn't ask her to remove the dog, so she never bothered to. But then at the same time, she allowed searchers to go in and search her RV, allegedly. She claimed that she didn't want her dog hurt and that the dog was just protecting her property. And yet she had no problem with removing it for searchers to go in and go through her RV. So it seems that the main thing was that she just didn't want the RCMP to go into her RV. Or maybe she didn't want the RCMP to see her dog. And the way she tells it, when Constable Mason returned on the Sunday with the warrant to search the RV, Janie quite happily removed the dog and allowed them to search. I pointed out the discrepancies in what she was saying, how on one hand she made it sound like her dog was this aggressive dog that was going to protect its territory, and then on the other hand she's telling Malaya, if they search my van, you hold my dog. And she's allowing the searchers into the RV with no concerns for their safety. And of course, the difference with when they arrive on the Sunday, she's more than happy to just pull out the dog and have it out of the way. She describes it as territorial, but I showed you the clip from her interview where she comes out of the RV and the dog happily hops down the steps and then quietly goes across to the gate to check out the cameraman who's standing near the gate filming. And of course the dog was also ignoring the cats. So there was a lot that I went through in yesterday's video. It's worth watching. There's a lot that I went through that showed that things don't quite add up when it comes to Janie's dog. So in this video, what I want to address is the fact that she claims that her dog is easily triggered. But then there's contradictions with that too. So I want to go through and discuss the comments that she's made with regards to her dog barking, with regards to it being triggered, and the things that just don't add up with that. Now, before I get into that, I just want to thank those people who've been doing the Buy Me a Coffee and super thanks. It is greatly appreciated. You are getting me just that little bit closer to achieving my goal of buying a MacBook, which will take my channel to the next level. Now, I also want to thank all those people who've made really thoughtful comments on my videos lately. I don't think I give enough acknowledgement to the sort of comments that appear in my comments section for my videos. There's a lot of thought goes into a lot of those comments, and even if I don't get a chance to respond to them all the time, I do read them, and there's some really good thoughts in there. Anyway, with that said, let's jump in and have a look at Janie's claims of this dog being a reactive dog that barks at everything.
But I had asked Daniel when I was there anyway. That was not the thought. When I was there, I asked Daniel what kind of a dog his mum had. Because I said, if somebody come into the property and took the kids, I said, wouldn't your mum's dog bark? Because it barked all day Saturday. It would stop barking. And he said, well, that's the thing. He said, mum's dog didn't bark and it didn't wake her up. I said, well, then I can't see somebody being able to take the kids, because I said the dog should bark. He said, exactly.
So what Belinda's referring to here is a conversation that she had with Daniel on the Monday after Malaya cleared out. She went back on the Monday with her sister just to have a conversation with Daniel. She wasn't going back to search because she believed that if Malaya had left, there was no point in searching. She didn't believe the children were in the woods. And I think she's 100% spot on with that. And she's relaying the conversation that she had with Daniel about Janie's dog. She asked him what kind of dog it was, and wanted to know, wouldn't it bark if someone had come onto the property and taken the children? So by the Monday, Daniel was clearly already pushing the narrative of someone coming and taking the children. And she said, well, wouldn't your mum's dog have barked? Because it barked all day Saturday. It wouldn't stop barking. And he said, that's the thing, mum's dog didn't bark. It didn't wake her up. Note here, he didn't say, yes, it should have barked. He didn't confirm that that is the normal behaviour for that dog. He just said, that's the thing, it didn't bark, it didn't wake her up. Now, something that I should have sought clarification on from Belinda is when she said to him, what kind of dog does your mum have? Was that his response after she said, because it was barking all day Saturday? Was it his response to comment on the barking and not straight away say the type of dog? Or is just this the flow of her conversation here? Because we know that both Daniel and Janie are very good at not answering questions. It seems to me that in this conversation, Daniel has jumped on the fact that the dog didn't bark as opposed to giving answers with regards to what sort of dog it was. And it seems convenient for him for her to be asking about the dog barking, because that would play into the story that's being pushed that someone who knew the children came and took them, and that's why the dog didn't bark. Of course, there's no logic behind that, because Janie has already mentioned that the dog barks at everything. But honestly, I can hear Daniel making that response to Belinda saying, that's the thing, mum's dog didn't bark, sounding like, wow, I'm just so surprised, with that ridiculous smirk that he gets on his face, because it's probably suddenly occurred to him that, hey, this is something I can run with. And Belinda says that she said to him, the dog should bark, and he said, exactly. Now, this is coming after her mentioning that the dog barked all day Saturday. So in her head, what she's saying is the dog that she heard barking all day Saturday should have barked. And Daniel is essentially saying, yes, that dog that you heard all day Saturday should have barked. Has he actually confirmed to Belinda that Janie's dog is the dog that was barking on the Saturday? No. Has he confirmed that Janie's dog is a barker? No. He's just gone along with what she was saying and basically given answers that could be interpreted as him agreeing with her. As him saying, yes, his mother's dog barks and it should have barked.
That I do know the dog barked the whole time we were there. The dog just barked continuously. So I could tell the dog was a big dog. I couldn't quite see its face, but my sister and my daughter were close enough to the trailer and they stated that it was a big dog.
So first of all, Belinda makes it about as clear as you can. That dog was barking continually. On the Saturday, it didn't let up at all. And she's saying that she could tell from its bark that it was a big dog. She couldn't see its face, but from the sound of the bark, it sounded like a big dog. And she said that her sister and Chelsea had seen the dog through the window of the RV, and they confirmed that it was a big dog. Now, I have got information from Chelsea about her description of the dog, but I'm going to cover that in tomorrow's video, because in tomorrow's video I am going to look at the question of were there two dogs. But certainly the information we're getting here from Belinda is that it was a big dog and it barked continuously on the Saturday. This is a highly reactive dog. Now, Janie's CBC interview was released on the 18th of July. That's only 2 months after the children went missing. And yet what we see is this super calm dog that doesn't even pay attention to the strangers that are on the property. I played this clip yesterday where Janie's coming out of the RV. The dog bounces down the steps and goes straight across to the gate to check out the cameraman. There is nothing aggressive in the body language of that dog. I know when this interview first came out, people asked if maybe the dog was sedated. But the way that dog bounces down those stairs, that dog is not sedated. Even if the dog was sedated, you would still see something in its body language showing that it is reacting to these strangers on the property, particularly given that it is 2 months since the search ended, meaning that she's had 2 months of quiet time on the property. So after 2 months of not having people around the property, that dog should be super reactive again. It shouldn't be just quietly sitting there in the window with its eyes almost closed and then quietly hopping down the steps, going across to check out the cameraman, not making a sound. Could a dog that size have a bark that makes it sound like a big dog? Potentially, yes. But it depends on the dog's head. That dog has a head that basically looks like it belongs on a dog that size. From my experience, when you have these crossbreeds that are bred down from bigger dogs, if they have the larger buffy heads, that's when they're going to sound like a big dog. But of course we didn't hear this dog bark, so we don't know what his bark sounds like. Maybe this dog never barks.
The dog barked from the time we entered the property. It just became background noise. It never stopped barking.
So logically, if it never stopped barking from the time that Belinda arrived on the property on the Saturday to the time that they left, then that should be the same situation with this interview that we saw. Particularly because you see at one point there's a bunch of people down the bottom of the driveway. You saw the back of Dingbat walking away, but there was also a cluster of people at the bottom of the driveway. You had the reporter and her cameraman right there at the RV, but there was no barking. Janie talks about her dog being under veterinary care and how it's becoming calmer or something like that. But in 2 months' time, a dog that is so reactive that it barks non-stop all day while there are people on the property is not going to go from being like that to being this dopey thing that we saw in the CBC video.
She told me that if I interfered in her investigation, she'd have me removed off the property. I told her there was a dog in there. If she didn't even give me the chance to tell me to take my dog out of there. She started shooting off to me.
Something that occurred to me when I was doing yesterday's video and I was listening to these bits of audio where she's talking about Constable Mason going to go into the RV and Janie tells her there's a dog in there. I can tell you right now that's not how the conversation went. Why? Because this all occurred on the Saturday. Belinda was there to witness it. And when Belinda got there, the dog was barking. She said the dog did not stop barking the entire time that she was there. Now, given the number of people that were around the property on Friday and Saturday, then that dog should not have stopped barking at all on Friday and Saturday. Meaning that Constable Mason would have already known there was a dog in the RV. Now, if you are a constable and you have to go and search an RV and you can hear a dog barking incessantly in there, and as Belinda said, she said it sounded like a big dog, you are not going to just blindly walk up to that RV and open the door. Nobody in their right mind is going to do that. And certainly not a constable. So logically, it would seem that Janie probably was asked to remove the dog from the RV and chose not to do so. The question is, was the dog put in the RV to deter people from going in? Or was it genuinely a case where the dog was in the RV and because it was so reactive, Janie didn't want people going in and going near the dog? But as I said yesterday, she was more than happy for the searchers to go in there. So it seems that with the dog being in the RV, the situation there is one of two things. Either the dog was there to prevent the RCMP from going into the RV, or Janie didn't want the RCMP to go into the RV and see the dog. Anyway, I'm going to put a pin in that and discuss that a little bit more in tomorrow's video, because what I'm covering in tomorrow's video I think may provide more of an answer to that question.
My dog has lived a quiet life here, and all of a sudden I have all these search and rescue people here, all cops, helicopters, drones. My dog is got so much anxiety in him, he's losing his hair. I had him to the vet, told him as long as I was stressed out, my dog would be stressed out.
Now, Janie's already told us that, you know, her dog had a quiet life until Jack and Lily turned up. And then with them being around, things got a little bit louder for the dog and it was reactive to them. And now she's saying, well, you know, my dog's had a quiet life up until this search. So she's saying that her dog has had this quiet life and then all of a sudden there's cops and helicopters and drones, and her dog he's got so much anxiety in him that he's losing his hair. What is interesting here, first of all, is she starts saying something about her dog. My dog is so something. And then she says he's got so much anxiety in him, he's losing his hair. She's not saying that that has passed. She's not saying when all this was happening, he had all this anxiety. She's saying this is still ongoing. This Facebook audio is after the CBC interview. Now, if a dog is reactive, and she's saying it's still having anxiety problems, it's going to be reactive as well. It should have reacted when she did that interview. But not only that, she's talking about two very, very different things here. On one hand, she's talking about the dog being stressed out, picking up on her mood, and getting stressed out to the point where it's losing its coat. This is a different thing to a reactive dog who is barking non-stop at everything. Yes, reactive dogs can become that way because of anxiety. Usually it is an anxiety kind of thing. But a reactive dog that barks is doing so because in itself, it has got that anxiety in itself, not that it's picking up anxiety from the people around it. Whereas a dog that is having anxiety issues to the point where it is losing its coat, yes, that can be a result of being around someone who is constantly anxious and putting the dog on edge. But here's the thing with that. If a dog is reactive to the point where it is just barking non-stop, then that dog is most likely not responsive to its handler. It needs more training. It needs to learn to gain confidence. It needs a lot of work. So saying that her dog is losing its fur because it's anxious is saying that her dog is tuned into her, meaning that it shouldn't be a reactive dog that's barking at everything, because you've got two different causes of behaviour there and they kind of contradict each other. I mean, if we were to look at these dogs in terms of children in the classroom, this dog that gets anxiety and loses its coat, that's the kid that hides at the very back of the classroom, sits at the furthest back seat, and is super, super quiet because they're so anxious about everything. The dog that is reactive and barking, that's the kid who bullies the other kids, because that's how they cope with their anxiety, with their issues. This dog that Janie is describing here, saying that it's lived a quiet life, and then with all the people, the cops, the helicopters and everything, it's got so anxious that it's losing its fur, that is not the same dog that barks all day at people out on the property. And certainly, if it was the same dog and she had taken it to the vet wouldn't say, as long as you're stressed out, your dog will be stressed out. Because the vet would look at the overall behaviours and say, you need to get in contact with a dog trainer who can support you in modifying this dog's behaviours. Very different strategies for very different behaviours.
My dog does not like Lily's loud scream, just like any dog would not like Lily's loud scream. I can't stand Lily's loud scream. If you watched her birthday party, the way she screamed, could you stand Lily's scream all the time? My dog reacts. My dog tells me when there's people in the yard. My dog tells me when the kids are outside. My dog is really sensitive because he's so used to being all alone here for the last for whatever the kids showed up here 2 years ago. My dog has been used to quietness. When Jack and Lily moved in here, my dog got more sensitive to sounds because of the kids yelling, screaming. So yes, my dog is very sensitive to Lily's scream and Jack screaming.
Now, I've mentioned this multiple times. There's this thing that Janie and Daniel both do, and that is they give you a bit of information, just enough to make you draw the conclusion that they want you to draw. So let's unpack all this stuff that Janie has just said about her dog here. She starts off with saying her dog doesn't like Lily's scream, and then she goes on to this long rant about Lily's scream. I don't like Lily's loud scream. Would you like Lily's loud scream? Well, even if I didn't like Lily's loud scream, I wouldn't be barking wildly. She's not saying here that her dog is triggered by Lily's loud scream. She's just saying it doesn't like Lily's loud scream. My dog Taka doesn't like thunder. She'll do one of two things. She will either come over to me and press herself up against my leg about as hard as she can, or she'll forget that she's a big 30-kilo dog and try and squeeze into teeny tiny spots in the house to get away from the thunder. She doesn't bark at it. Janie's not telling us that her dog barks when Lily screams. She's saying her dog just doesn't like Lily's scream, just like she doesn't like Lily's scream. Well, logically, we know Janie doesn't bark. Well, actually, Janie's a bit unique. But generally, you would expect that Janie's saying that. She's not saying that she barks at Lily when Lily screams, and her dog barks at Lily when Lily screams. No, she's just saying her dog doesn't like Lily's scream, just like she doesn't like Lily's scream. And then she goes on to say, she says, my dog reacts. And then she redirects and she says, my dog tells me when there's people in the yard. My dog tells me when the kids are outside. Again, she's not specifically telling us that her dog barks when the kids are out in the yard or when there are people outside. This time I'm going to use Mouse as an example. That's my little 1-year-old Chihuahua. He's got many ways of telling me things. If I'm working at my desk here and he wants to go outside, he tells me that by going and standing in the kitchen, because you've got to go through the kitchen to take him outside. And if I'm still not noticing, then he does this weird thing where he basically lies down with the front end, but his back end still stays up in the air, and he just stares at me until I get the message and take him outside. If I'm lying in bed and I'm trying to read something on my phone, he tells me he needs to go outside by putting his head between my face and the phone so that I can't see the phone. He doesn't bark. If he wants to go for a walk, he goes and stands underneath the peg where the dog harnesses are hanging, and he sits there and he stares up at his harness to get the message across that he wants to go for a walk. He doesn't bark. So Janie telling us that her dog tells her when there's people in the yard or tells her when the kids are outside isn't specifically saying that her dog barks when there's people out in the yard or barks when the children are outside. And then she goes on to tell us about her dog being really sensitive because he's been by himself for all this time. And then the kids moved in and he's been used to the quietness. And then Jack and Lily moved in there and he became more sensitive to sounds because of the kids yelling and screaming. And then she's like, yes, so my dog is very sensitive to Lily's scream and to Jack screaming. So the main word that she keeps repeating here is sensitive, not reactive. When you describe a dog as being sensitive to something, then you can have all manner of reactions from that dog because of their sensitivity. Like I've described with Taka and Thunder. She's sensitive to thunder, so she tries to hide under the desk, or she comes and pushes herself against me. But a dog that barks at everything, I would describe that as reactivity. And in some ways, one of those is internal, one of those is external. So they're opposites, really. Yes, a dog can be sensitive to things and it causes it to react. But Janie's not saying that here. She's saying her dog's just really sensitive. And she's given this example of her dog is losing its fur because it's so sensitive. But she's not saying anything here about her dog barking incessantly. She's just saying it's sensitive to these things.
He did not know Officer Mason. And the reason why I said there was a dog in there is so she would not open the door and something happened.
So here, she's back to describing a dog that is reactive. If Constable Mason goes and opens that door, something might happen. When she's talking about her dog being sensitive, she's talking about it in terms of noise, in terms of overstimulation. And that makes her dog sensitive. But here, she's worrying about a person simply opening the door of her RV and the dog is going to do something. That's reactivity. That's not the same thing. I'm guessing that she wasn't expecting Constable Mason to open the door and scream at the same time, which may cause a reaction from the dog, based on how she's just described it. So this is not a situation that is the same as what she's just told us in terms of her dog being sensitive to these sounds. This is a situation where she's describing a dog that reacts to the presence of a stranger. But again, what I don't get here is that we've heard that dog was barking incessantly on that Saturday. So Constable Mason was not going to go and open that door to a dog that was barking incessantly and sounded like a large dog. You'd be a fool to do that. So clearly this is not the full story here. And if you're worrying about something happening, then ask her to wait outside the yard while you go into the RV, put a lead on your dog and take it to another part of the property. It's not rocket science. But again, this doesn't align with the dog that we saw in the CBC interview.
I have no idea what they went. I do not even know what they bought. I heard them out in the yard here Thursday afternoon. And when I heard them out, my dog started barking. My dog tells me when the kids are in the yard. Okay? I went out. When they heard them out in the yard, my dog started barking. I opened the door and let my dog out. My dog is penned in. I do not let my dog around Jack and Lily. From what I hear through the grapevine, Jack and Lily have not been around animals. When they first came here, I tried to introduce my dog to Jack and Lily, and Lily started to scream because my dog was near her. Ever since that, I've kept my dog away from the kids.
So here's where she's referring to her dog barking. But what is interesting is that she starts with, when I heard them out, my dog started barking. So her narrative is out of order. And again, she offers up that her dog tells her when the kids are in the yard. But when you have someone giving you a retelling of events that's not in a linear fashion, then you've got to question it. Because generally, if they are actually describing something that they have experienced, they're going to tell it to you in a linear fashion. I was inside, I heard the dog barking, and then I went outside and I saw that the children were outside. Or I was inside, I heard the dog barking, and then I heard the children outside, because the dog would hear the children before she did. But what she's saying is she heard them out, and she doesn't even finish the sentence, and then she says her dog started barking. So that's another red flag there. She doesn't put it in a full sentence. She heard them out. When I heard them out, my dog started barking. So is this something that she's made up to give the impression that her dog does bark at Lily and Jack? And maybe it doesn't actually do so. Because when she reiterates what she said, she does exactly the same thing. She says, I went out when they heard them out in the yard. My dog started barking. First of all, who's they that heard them out in the yard? I think she's just getting her sentence all muddled up because she's not recalling an event that occurred. She's basically making something up on the spot or making something up. She's, in her mind, she's got to remember that she's trying to describe that she heard the children outside, but she's also trying to give the impression that her dog was barking, and she's got it out of order. She's got all these points in her head that she wants to share as part of her narrative, but without the actual sensory experiences that go when you experience something happening, she doesn't have a reference to be able to tell it in order. So what do I mean by that? So when you actually experience something, you're experiencing it with all your senses. You hear something. You have some sort of sensory thing going on at the time because you hear something, you see something. You may have a tactile experience. So you may be heading out the door, so you might be holding the door at the time. So all these things help you remember the event. But if you are just describing something that you've made up, you don't have those things to anchor you down so that you can tell it in a linear order. And then we have this odd statement that makes absolutely no sense. So she's heard the children in the yard, then the dog has started barking, and she opens her door and lets the dog out. And she follows this by saying, my dog is penned in. I don't let my dog around Lily and Jack. Well, allegedly, Lily and Jack were playing by the swings, which is right next to the yard. And yet she let her dog out right there. This is a dog that she claims reacts to the sound of the children being outside. This is a dog that, if it is the same dog that was there on the Saturday, will bark incessantly. If her dog is reactive, as she says, then her letting it out of her RV at that moment, the dog would go straight to the side of the fence and just begin barking at the children. Now, seriously, if your dog barks at things like that, no matter how much you love your dog, it's going to drive you bonkers if there is a trigger and your dog has access to that trigger. We've heard the way Janie talks about Lily and Jack. She's not a very tolerant person. So I can't see her being the sort of person that would tolerate her dog running out into the yard, running across the yard, and then just standing there barking at Lily and Jack. But according to her, the dog is reactive around Lily and Jack. If the dog really was a barker, for her own sanity, not just for everyone else around her, you would expect that she would leave the dog in the RV while Lily and Jack were outside. So this claim that she let her dog outside even though she knew that Lily and Jack were outside playing by the swings makes no sense. Unless the dog isn't a reactive dog, unless the dog is just going to go outside and watch Lily and Jack. And again, going back to the scenario where she claims that her dog is reactive and it barks at Lily and Jack, she then gives a story about, well, from what she hears through the grapevine, that Lily and Jack have not been around animals. And she talks about when they first came to her place, she tried to introduce her dog to them, and Lily started to scream because her dog was near her. And she says, ever since that, I've kept my dog away from the kids. So now she's telling us that when the dog is near Lily, Lily screams. But she let the dog out in the yard, right next to where the children were playing. This dog, which allegedly is reactive and barks at the children, which would then, based on Janie's story, cause Lily to scream and would make the dog react even more. There's something just not right with this story. And most of you have probably seen this video from Cindy and Wade's place, where the children are in the living room watching television and the two dogs are hanging around because the children have got food. And Lily is completely ignoring the dogs. She lifts her feet up at one stage, but she's not paying any attention to the dogs at all. She's not bothered by them. And you've got one dog over on the far side of the living room, like closest to us, which is based on the tint video that we saw. That must be the pup. Now, it's hard to tell with the pup actually lying on the ground, but at the very least, it's probably as big as the dog that we saw in the CBC interview. But because it is going to grow into a bigger dog, it's even more solid than the dog we saw in the CBC interview. So why is Lily completely fine with these animals, but allegedly not fine with Janie's dog? There's a bit of audio from Belinda, which I love. And you may have forgotten this bit, but I'm going to play it for you.
The far side of the yard I let grow wild, except for one pathway that I mow through it. Lily used to love standing at my patio door because if I don't make it down the backyard to feed the raccoons, they'll come up and put their paws on the patio door, and she'd be on the inside squealing, looking at them. her squeals weren't as loud.
So Sunny asked Belinda about the squeal that Lily was doing in that party video. And this was Belinda's response, that Lily would do it when the raccoons came to the door asking to be fed. Honestly, I want to go to Nova Scotia just to go and experience all the animals in Belinda's backyard. Because we don't have raccoons in Australia. We don't have hummingbirds. And it sounds like she's like the lady version of Dr. Dolittle. I'd probably be standing next to that screen door squealing in excitement too if I got to see a raccoon coming right up to the door. So based on what Belinda's just said here, it seems that it's quite possible that when Lily first met Janie's dog, that she squealed in excitement. And yet Janie has taken that as Lily not being good around dogs. But note, she's forgotten about the thing where this dog supposedly barks at the children when she's telling this story. Here, the focus of the story here is that when Lily met her dog, Lily squealed. She doesn't say, and then the dog barked at her and we just had chaos. She's saying she keeps her dog away from them because she doesn't think the children are accustomed to the animals, and Lily squealed when she first met the dog. She's not saying here she keeps her dog away from them because it barks at them. This is the woman who was so concerned about her dog being hurt by the RCMP officer when she wanted to search her RV. And yet she's not concerned about Lily's scream upsetting her dog and making it bark. All she's talking about here is she keeps her dog away from Lily because Lily screams. you would think that she would add in there, and then it upsets her dog and makes her dog bark. Because she's giving the impression here that her dog is so important to her. So you would think she would refocus again on her dog rather than telling the story about Lily and then stopping the story there. And if, as she claims, Lily squeals when she's around the dog, when she sees the dog, then why put the dog out in the yard? Because then, based on Janie's story, putting the dog in the yard would trigger Lily to scream, which allegedly her dog doesn't like. It stresses her dog out. Janie doesn't like it either. And allegedly her dog always barks at Lily and Jack, which would probably cause Lily to scream even more. And yet her reaction when she hears the children outside is to let her dog out into the yard. It makes no sense to me.
My brother called me at 8:48. We talked for 2 minutes, 59 seconds. After that, I laid down. My dog barked because Lily and Jack were here where the swings are.
Now you can see there's 2 swings where the kids play. My bedroom is right there. I heard the kids. This is where the kids' swings are. This is where they always played.
And so that's where
I heard them. And I can hear everything in that trailer.
Okay, I thought I'd just put them back to back before I spoke. So first of all, she says her dog barked because Lily and Jack were out at the swings. Now we have her doing this CBC interview, and she's standing here at the swings with the reporter and the cameraman, describing that this is the location where she heard the kids. You even have her doing part of the interview standing directly outside of the door of her RV with Ali from CBC. Can you see why this is problematic? Not only were they standing in the location of the swings where Janie claims that she heard the children and then her dog was barking because they were at the swings, but she's having this conversation with the reporter, and the cameraman was there as well. Her dog didn't bark. She's doing part of the interview directly outside the RV. Her dog didn't bark. If this dog was territorial, like she claims, if this dog is reactive, like she claims, why are they standing outside the RV having a conversation and the dog's not barking? Why were they over by the swings and the dog wasn't barking? Now, I showed earlier where she's bringing the dog out of the RV, and you can see it's got a spring in its step as it's bouncing down the steps. The dog was not sedated. But even if it was sedated, if that dog is a reactive dog that is territorial and reacts when people come near that RV, her standing directly outside of the RV with a stranger is still going to trigger the dog to bark. But it's dead silent. There's no reaction at all from the dog. Now, I'm going to play that bit again where she's standing at the swings and describing what she heard, because there's something missing from that narrative.
Now you can see there's 2 swings where the kids play. My bedroom is right there. I heard the kids. This is where the kids' swings are. This is where they always played.
and so that's where
I heard them. And I can hear everything in that trailer.
There's no mention whatsoever of the dog barking. She says that this is where she heard them, and she can hear everything in that trailer. Now, I would expect, given that she is standing in the location where she claims the children were playing, that that would be an extra sensory trigger for her to allow her to give an accurate recount of what occurred. As in, this is not her sitting there telling people over the phone on Facebook what happened. This is her standing in the actual location where allegedly the children were playing. So she has the extra visual prompt there. I would expect it to be more likely for her to describe the dog barking and then her hearing the children than for her to leave out the part about her dog barking because the children were out there playing by the swings. If the dog is reactive, as what we heard Belinda saying, where it had barked all day on the Saturday, then you would think that that would be something that would stick in her mind, because it is a painful experience if you have a dog that is barking incessantly. So it is going to stick in her mind alongside the children being at the swings, especially given that she focuses so much on her dog. So it's interesting that she's saying, I heard the children out here, but there's no mention of the dog barking at the children at this point in time.
My dog alerts me when people come in my yard. So when he hears a voice, he barks. I get up and I look to see if anybody's there.
Again, this doesn't make sense. If her dog barks when it hears a voice, how come she was doing the interview directly outside the door of her RV and there wasn't a peep from that dog?
My dog usually sits in the window. But that morning, my dog was sleeping with me in bed. When he heard the kids yelling, or kids talking, I should say, talking, my dog was in bed with me, and I told him, it's the kids outside playing. He shut right up. Then he barked again when Daniel was yelling out the back door for the kids.
Again, you have a narrative that's not entirely linear, in that she misses out the crucial information of her dog actually barking in the first place. She says, my dog usually sits in the window, but that morning my dog was in sleeping with me in bed. And she says when he heard the kids yelling or kids talking. So this is clearly after people have made comments. So now she's talking about the kids talking. She's trying to be nicer towards the kids, but she doesn't know how to be, clearly. Because changing her narrative from yelling to talking doesn't display any sort of sympathetic thoughts towards the children at all. It's just changing her narrative a little bit. So she goes, when he heard the kids talking, and then she backtracks and says, my dog was in bed with me, and I told him, it's the kids outside playing, and he shut right up. So the first problem with this is that all she has the dog doing is hearing the children playing. She doesn't have the dog actually barking. She says he heard the children playing and she told him it's just the kids playing and he shut right up. But she didn't establish the fact that he was barking. If this was something that actually occurred, then you would expect that detail to be included. As I've said, if you have a reactive dog, you're not going to overlook missing the fact that the dog was barking. Not only that, but the way she's telling it makes it sound like the dog remained in bed with her the entire time. This is a dog that is supposedly so reactive that it barked non-stop on the Saturday. And yet, apparently, it heard the children outside. And this dog, she says, doesn't like Lily. It doesn't like Lily screaming. But it wasn't triggered enough to actually get out of bed. That's not normal behaviour for a dog, for any dog, reactive or not. Now, after I broke my ankle last year, I got into the habit of getting my groceries delivered every fortnight. And I realised how damn convenient it is. So now I always get my groceries delivered every fortnight. Now, because I go with Coles, my groceries, I can get them delivered for $2. If I select a 6-hour window for delivery. prior to delivery, they email me and say, okay, it's this 1 hour window out of the 6 hours. So it's not like I'm having to wait around and think, okay, it's going to come sometime within this whole massive 6 hour block. It just means that they choose within the 1 hour block of when my groceries are going to arrive. And for that, I only pay $2 as opposed to $6 or $11 depending on the various choices. That means that sometimes the only block that's available is for early morning through to lunchtime. So there have been times when my groceries have been delivered when I've still been in bed. My dogs leap out of bed the moment they hear that gate outside squeaking. And they dash to the door because they know that's how people enter the house. Now, while Mouse can be a little bit reactive at times, when we're inside, when it's something like that, he's not overly reactive. So the dogs don't bark, they just run to the front door. But we're talking about a dog that is allegedly quite reactive to the point where it barks when it hears a voice outside. And yet Janie is claiming that the dog just stayed in bed with her. And she told it, oh, it's just the kids, and it went quiet. Even though she forgot to mention that it barked in the first place. This to me sounds like this story is really not truthful. If this dog is as reactive as we're supposed to believe it is, if this dog reacts when it hears Lily and Jack, then it should go straight for the window or straight for the door the moment it realises they're out there. If this is the dog that barked all day on the Saturday, why would it calmly just stay in bed with Janie when she told it to be quiet?
And Mason came here either Sunday morning. I might have said Monday on my interview. I will correct myself. But she came here Sunday morning. I was over in the big trailer. I stayed the night over there Saturday night with Daniel. And she came. I seen her walking in the driveway. I opened the back door and asked her, yes. She said, would you please remove your dog so we can search your trailer?
So, according to Janie, the dog sits in the window and it barks if anyone comes onto the property. She's talking about the Sunday when Constable Mason came with the warrant to search her RV. And based on this story, Janie was alerted to the fact that Constable Mason was there because she looked out and saw her in the driveway. There's no mention here of, oh, I heard my dog barking and I looked out and there was Constable Mason in the driveway. The only reference to the dog is her being asked to remove it from the RV so they could search. So apparently this dog barked all day Saturday. Janie was so concerned about how this dog might react if someone went into the RV that she wouldn't let the RCMP go in there. And then on the Sunday when they turn up, she spots them. She doesn't hear the dog barking. She sees them in the driveway. And then she goes and lets the dog out of the RV or removes the dog from the RV so they can search. But here's the thing too. She's essentially telling us that she stayed overnight in the trailer and left her dog in the RV overnight. Does anyone else find that really odd? If she was staying in the trailer overnight, there were no kids in there. So why not take the dog in there with her? Especially since she claims that the dog sleeps in her bed. Not only that, if this dog is such a reactive dog that it had barked all day on Saturday, you would imagine that being left alone in that RV would cause it to bark all night Saturday night. Because if it's that reactive, then it's going to be worse when its owner's not there to give it some level of comfort. There's just something that's not right with this story.
Wednesday, they left at around 12 o'clock to go to Patty's to do laundry. They didn't get home till 10 o'clock. The reason I know is my dog barked and let me know.
So now we're back to the dog being reactive again. The dog barked and let her know that they'd gotten home late on Wednesday. Personally, I would have thought you would have seen their headlights coming up the driveway, but clearly, maybe Janie's just blind as a bat. We've seen on every image there is of that property that they always park the vehicles forward of the trailer. So she's saying that when they got home on that Wednesday night, even though they were right down that end of the driveway, her dog still reacted and barked. So based on that, the dog should have been barking the entire time that she was doing that interview. She was standing down on the driveway, roughly where the cars park at one point in time, no barking. She was standing closer than that, showing the reporter where she allegedly raked the driveway, no barking from the dog then. They were standing on that back deck, opening and shutting the door, no barking from the dog. And yet, when Malaya and Daniel got home, a vehicle that, yes, okay, it was a new vehicle, but the dog still would have been familiar with it by that point. It would have been a quiet vehicle. And yet, allegedly, the dog barked when they got home. And that's how she knew they got home. Maybe this dog has some sort of selective barking syndrome, because that's what she is implying here with her many contradictory comments.
So that's another thing I can't understand is if I never heard the kids running. If the kids were running out of the yard, out of the gate, out of the fence, my dog would have still been barking. As I said, because of Lily's loud scream and hollering.
Now, based on Janie's narrative, you would think that these children were outside playing every day. And yet, allegedly, even with them being outside playing every day for 2 years, the dog wasn't accustomed to that and was barking anytime they were outside playing. Which again takes us back to the CBC interview. It certainly wouldn't have been accustomed to Janie standing outside the door of her RV having a discussion with a perfect stranger. But it wasn't barking then. Now, yes, a particular tone of voice can set dogs off, whereas other voices don't. But everything we're hearing, on one hand, makes it sound like this dog would bark at anything. And yet we look at the CBC interview and there's no barking whatsoever. She's claiming that the dog was in bed with her when she heard the children outside and she just told it to be quiet and it didn't bark. Or it stopped barking even though it never started barking based on what she's saying. Sounds like the dog didn't even get out of bed, which does not match with what she's saying, on the other hand, in terms of the reactivity and the way it barks at pretty much everything.
I think that was Monday. My sister drove me up there. We didn't go there to search that time. I see no point in searching any further once Malaya had left. I wanted to go and I wanted to speak to Daniel. So my sister took me there. She dropped me off. I walked towards the trailer. Janie come out of the trailer and asked who I was. And as I was stating who I was, Daniel come out and said that that's Belinda, Cody's mom. So he come out and I said, I hope you talk to me. And he said, I will. He said, I don't want to talk here. Let's go out in the driveway further. And it wasn't until after I left that I noticed there was no dog barking.
So the Saturday when she was there, the dog barked the entire time. So much so that it just became background noise because it just never shut up. And she's talking about the Monday when she went there and she realised after she left, she never heard any sound from that dog. Now let's look at where all the conversations, all the action was occurring. In the driveway. That is the dog's territory. Janie has said when people come onto the property, the dog would alert her. The dog sits in the window of the RV and barks, allegedly. Yet this dog maybe saw Belinda coming up the hill, maybe not. Would have heard Belinda's voice, which wasn't a familiar voice to it. And Belinda had a conversation with Janie outside, and then she had a conversation with Daniel outside. Now, I haven't clarified with her when Daniel said let's go further up the driveway if he meant further up towards Janie's RV or down towards the road, but clearly away from the trailer. But either way, based on the dog's behaviour on the Saturday, the dog should have been barking the entire time that Belinda was there. Particularly because Belinda said when she got there, Janie came out of the trailer. Janie was in the trailer with Daniel on Monday. So it seems that she must have stayed in the trailer Saturday night and Sunday night with Daniel. Based on what she said about Constable Mason, you would think that means that the dog was left in the RV on those 2 nights and that she didn't take the dog into the trailer. But either way, the dog didn't bark at all on the Monday, after barking incessantly on the Saturday. And allegedly, this dog that is such a comfort to Janie, this dog that sleeps with Janie, this dog that is her loyal companion, was left locked in that teeny tiny RV overnight while Janie slept in the trailer 2 nights in a row. If what she said with Constable Mason is the same in terms of her sleeping in the trailer on Sunday night and leaving the dog in the RV on Sunday night. Because you would imagine that if she left it in the RV on Saturday night and slept in the trailer, that if she slept in the trailer Sunday night, she would also leave it in the RV. Something just does not add up in terms of the dog. You have, on one hand, she's describing this dog as being reactive. It barks at everything. On the Saturday, the dog didn't shut up. And then, on the other hand, she describes the dog as being an anxious dog that's losing its fur because of its anxiety. These are 2 very, very different things. Now, I've gone through Janie's various narratives that she gave on Facebook, and each time when she's talking about her dog barking, it really doesn't match the behaviours that Belinda has described. And a lot of the time she forgets to add in the fact that her dog has barked. We've seen that dog in the CBC interview. Never once did that dog bark, even when Janie was standing on the steps for the RV, talking to the interviewer directly outside the door of the RV. She let the dog out of the RV and it went across to the gate to where the cameraman was filming. There was no sign of any sort of aggressive body language from that dog. If I was standing at that gate and I saw that dog come out of that trailer and come across to the gate where I was standing, I would probably squat down and I would put my hand out for it to smell, because I would read that dog as being non-aggressive, non-threatening. Belinda stated she knows what the sound of a big dog barking is. And the dog that she heard barking was a big dog. And in fact, Chelsea and Belinda's sister saw the dog and they said it was a big dog. This dog, Tucker, that we saw on the CBC interview, looks like he's never barked in his life. He certainly doesn't come across as a reactive dog. What I think has happened here is that the dog that was in that RV on the Saturday is not that black dog, as suggested by Hayley and Belinda. And I'm going to go into that more in tomorrow's video. But it seems that the dog that was in the RV on the Saturday was a dog that is reactive and barks a lot. not that black dog, because the black dog is not reactive even in the slightest bit. Okay, just a quick look at what Janie said to the RCMP before I finish this off. So in this, she said that basically her dog started barking and that woke her up. This is after she'd gone and done the chickens and let the dog out for a run. And she heard Lily and Jack in the backyard playing on the swings and laughing, then dozed off again. Well, that doesn't sound like a reactive dog, because if it was barking at Jack and Lily and it continued to bark, there's no way she would have dozed off again. Now, it seems almost certain that the children were not around Friday morning anyway, so this story is made up. But it seems like she's come up with this story and used her dog barking as the prompt for her to wake up and hear the children outside playing. But the behaviour she's describing here really doesn't match the behaviour that we've heard from the Saturday afternoon. Now, we know that Janie, like Daniel, was paying attention to what was happening online. How do we know that? Because the way she echoed Belinda's statements. In Belinda's interview with CBC a month earlier, she had said that she knew in her heart that the children weren't alive. So what does Janie do with her CBC interview? She's like, "A heart don't lie. My heart tells me that these children are still alive." That was a direct echo of what Belinda had said in her CBC interview. So in terms of the dog barking, I suspect that Janie has heard Belinda talking on It's a Crime and Shame and heard Belinda talking about the dog barking all day. So that when she did her whole Facebook tour, she really pushed the narrative of her dog being a dog that barks. But she never quite got it right. She never gave the impression of the dog being a reactive dog, not in the way that the dog on the Saturday was. Now, in her interview here with the RCMP, she talks about her dog barking and waking her up. She doesn't talk about her dog continuing to bark. Her dog just barked and woke her up and then she dozed off. So clearly her dog stopped barking. My question though is, they've listed the dates as the 2nd and the 5th of May in terms of when she was interviewed. And I'd like to know when she said this particular statement. Because we know that on the Monday, which was the day when Belinda went out there and the day when Janie did this second interview with the RCMP, that was the day when Belinda raised the question with Daniel, "What is your mother's dog?" Because it barked all day Saturday. Why didn't it bark when the children went missing? So could it be that this particular reference of her being woken up by her dog barking is prompted by Belinda asking Daniel, how come the dog didn't bark? So already, just from what I've looked at in this video and the previous video, it certainly seems that we're looking at two different dogs here. And that's what I'm actually going to focus on in tomorrow's video, because there's quite a few things there that I haven't covered yet that point directly to there being definitely two different dogs. So that brings us to the end of this video. So thanks for listening. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Help me to build my channel. I'm trying to reach 7,000 subscribers. Also, please hit the like button. That gets this out there into the algorithm. And also, please leave a comment below. I'm really interested to know your thoughts on this barking issue. So on that note, thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.